people kept saying, you can't do it. You're not Rupert Murdoch. You're not Fox. You're not Time Warner. And my partner, Alan, and I just were going, but it's such a good idea. Somebody eventually will do it.
Excited to have Larry here with us today. Some of you have met Larry once before at our events, but he's recently released a new book. I'll hold it up here. It's called Offscript. And it says, never follow the crowd. I finished that book this week, actually, to make sure I'd have some sharp questions for Larry today. And it was really interesting. Took a bunch of notes. And I think that having people here on stage who have built something from scratch that was completely new in their industry and then been able to scale it to $1 billion valuation exit is something pretty unique. And it's pretty, makes me lean forward as a founder. A couple things from the book I wanted to emphasize. Larry started out as a cable splicer, making $90 a week in New York City, digging underneath the streets, tying together wires. He also had a theme in his book of being firm but fair with people. He made some bold asks to make big jumps during his career a few times. He talks about simplifying the complex several times in his book. He also talked about passion and how you don't want to follow your passion too much. So we'll get into a lot of these topics, but I encourage you to check out the book afterwards to connect with Larry after he's off stage. What else would you add to your bio or introduction that maybe Charlie didn't mention as you walked on stage?
Sure. I mean, everybody knows E, and I call this era of my life my Kardashian's repentance tour. I have to apologize to the world for unleashing them. But I've started media companies in Russia. I had the #1 TV show in Russia 5 days a week for 10 years. I started a big music festival in Russia. Unfortunately, my partner was a guy named Vladimir Putin. And we had to end that festival about 4 years ago for obvious reasons. I moved on to China. I have a company in China. We're still the only American company that's allowed to be in the media business in China. We do everything there. And then when COVID came, I started doing stuff here in the U.S. again, all with a social impact component to it. So that's kind of what I'm up to these days.
Great. Thank you. And I saw that you got a Hollywood Lifetime Achievement Award as well. Is that right?
Yeah, I've kind of resisted getting Lifetime Achievement Awards because I figured maybe they spoke to my doctor and they know something I don't. But also with the book, people have been after me to write the book for God knows how long, and I've always resisted it. But literally, I reinvent myself almost every 7 years. And while I do TV and film and other media pretty well, my real passion has been cooking. So I decided that I'll do the book with the various phases of my life, anecdotes that go with those phases, but also with the recipes that inspired me. So the book is somewhere between a bio and a cookbook.
Great. And then in the book, you actually mentioned that if you just follow your passion, you might end up homeless pretty quickly. Can you talk to that?
Sure. I get people all the time, and people ask me to talk to entrepreneurs and stuff. And, people are like, my passion is, knitting eyeglass cases or, things like that. And just because you're passionate about it, if there's no financial sustainability to it, my feeling is don't do it. I mean, I always tell people, find something that you're good at, work the hell out of it and become great at it. And then that will become your passion. That's kind of the way it was with me with the television world. I mean, I didn't start out thinking I was going to create TV shows all around the world. And, I just worked my butt off until I figured out how you do it and stuff like that. But my passion is cooking, and it's great. And when I get stressed out, I go in the kitchen and cook. And, but to do it to make a living, we all have the same necessities of life. We got to pay the rent. We got to send our kids to school and do all of that stuff there. And if you can't sustain financially by following your passion, you should find a different passion.
Right. It seemed like in your trajectory, you had this ability to look at something complex, make it more simple. You could negotiate with unions, with executive management. You could, ride both sides of like how people would normally think, where it might be one side or the other typically. Is that partially how you got done things that people said were impossible, or it just seems unreal what's happened?
Yeah. People say, well, why does your mind work the way it was? And other than my mother dropping me in my head when I was 1 year old, which she really did. There's no other logical explanation for it. But I had an interesting career path because I started out in the technical side of the cable business when nobody believed that anybody would ever pay for television. So, I mean, Richard mentioned that I literally got a job splicing the cables in the sewers of Manhattan for $90 a week. But because I knew how to read and write, the union asked me to become part of the negotiating committee to negotiate against Time Incorporated when Time was just a publishing company. And so I did that. And then for whatever reason, they decided that at 23 years old, I would be a good vice chairman of the Cable TV Workers of America. So at 23, I was a union official and then eventually moved into management. It was to be in a great time there because Time Inc. decided that over 10 years, they wanted to move from being a publishing company to a media company. So I got to be part of the group that started HBO and, you know, basically the cable business as we knew it, which is no longer the cable business as we knew it.
Right. And when you moved from New York to, I think it was Cable America in Los Angeles, you know, you basically told them like, oh, I need to get paid 4 times. So I'm getting paid now. And you didn't expect them to give it to you. I mean, that bold ask and then eventually them caving and pretty much giving you everything that you had boldly asked for. Is that partially what made you bold enough to start E? Just seeing that stuff could actually work when you do stuff like that?
Yeah. I mean, I grew up, I was a New York kid, family were immigrants, and their aspiration for me was to, get a job with a pension and be able to retire securely and all that. But when the big cities began to franchise cable TV, they realized that cable was not just about good reception. It wasn't just for rural, but there were all other opportunities. But they all wanted the cable to go underground. Well, the only guy in the country who knew how to build underground was me because I did it in Manhattan. And when I left Manhattan, I was at 25, I became director of operations of Manhattan Cable, the biggest cable company in the country, if not the world. And there was a Canadian company that won the franchise for Los Angeles. And they kept calling me, and I go, no, I'm not doing it. I'm like a Brooklyn kid. I'm going to La La Land. And then finally, the chairman of this Canadian company called me up and said, you got a girlfriend? I went, yeah. He goes, okay, I fly you and the girlfriend out to L.A., put you in the Bel Air Hotel. You got a limo for the weekend. I want an hour of your time. I said, listen, as long as you understand that there's no way in the world I'm possibly going to take this job, I'll do it. So, of course, we came out, and I was, an arrogant idiot then. And we go through the hour, and I'm going, okay, you got 58 minutes left. And I go, you got 2 minutes left. And I go, okay, you're done. And he goes, all right, one last question. What would it take for you to move out here? So I just decided I'm going to ask for ridiculous stuff. So I asked for like 4 times what I'm making in New York. At that time, Liberace had a house in Sherman Oaks with a piano-shaped swimming pool. I go, I want you to rent the Liberace house for me, and I want a car with it was even before cell phones. I want a car with a mobile phone. And he just looked at me and said, you're out of your mind. We would never do that. And I went, great, adios, your hour's up, I'm gone. But then I went back to New York, and it was in the winter. And when it snows in New York, it's always nice the first day. But then after that, you get splashed with this black gook from taxi cabs going by. And I got splashed, and I get to my office, and my assistant says, oh, that guy keeps calling you from Canada. I go, I get him on the phone. And, I got on the phone with him. He goes, what you asked for is ridiculous, but how fast could you be out here? So then I had my foot in my mouth, so that's why I'm in L.A.
So, let's give him a round of applause. So, in the book, you mentioned 2 things that are kind of connected. One is when you're in Los Angeles, assume everyone is lying until they prove to you otherwise. And then 2, when someone lies, then listen to who they're telling you they are and don't ever work with them again, and don't give them a second chance and expect them to change. Can you talk to that for a minute about any tests that you do to figure out who's honest, who's not, et cetera?
Sure. I mean, like I say, I always start out with, I could go and tell somebody, and the good part about being me is nobody knows who I am because I've been a hermit. So like I'll go to some place and somebody say, well, what do you do? I'd say, well, I'm making a movie. They go, I'm making a slate of movies. My feeling is in LA in particular, whenever somebody tells you something, just assume they're lying. You can't get hurt. Assume they're lying until they prove to you they're not lying. And so that's the way we kind of operate it. And then, if they prove it, then you can take them in. But if you find out that they're lying, whether they, did something to screw someone else, sooner or later they're going to get you. So just don't do business that way.
We've heard many times on stage from billion-dollar-plus family offices, super successful investors, that they are doing things that other people said was impossible, or that their story seems unreal. What is it that you think allowed you to persevere and get that done, like to see it through?
A lot of people say it's stupidity, but the one thing with E, which is I think the most interesting, there's never been a TV network of size that's ever been started by a person as opposed to a media company. And that was the way it was then, and it's the way it was now. E is now in 142 countries, and the valuation, the last they told me, we're up around $7 billion. And, it's just, to me, it's crazy numbers. People kept saying, you're not Rupert Murdoch, you're not Fox, you're not Time Warner. And my partner Alan and I just were going, but it's such a good idea. Somebody eventually will do it. It was interesting, and Richard knows this. When we started, the number to start a TV network was somewhere between $60 and $100 million. After 3.5 years of not being able to raise 10 cents, we realized nobody was giving us $60 or $100 million. And we actually met a bond house on Wall Street who just started investment banking. And when Alan and I, somebody introduced us, we went in the office, and the guy had like movie posters on the wall. And he's going, oh, I love this. I used to be the reporter for my college newspaper. And, and he goes, I really want to do it. I say, great. Could you give us more like the 100 million so we could do everything we want? He goes, oh, no, I can't do that. I go, all right, what is it, 60? He goes, well, I'm only allowed to sign for 2.5. I'm going like, what am I going to do with 2.5? It's like the minimum is 60. He goes, that's all I could sign for. And we just said, you know what? We're smart enough. We'll figure it out. So we literally took the $2.5 million. I had a friend teaching radio, television, film at the University of Texas in Austin. And I called him up and I said, Brian, I need interns like badly. So he sent me 31 kids from Texas, half of which never went back to Texas after. So E started with 11 employees and 31 interns. And, obviously our investors who put that first 2.5 in were kind of happy with the way it turned out.
That's great. I hear from so many people that have a new concept, an idea. It could be a fintech product or AI, and they say, oh, no, we need $11 million to get started. We need 30 million. We need 60 million. What would you say to them that you've learned from that?
Well, I think, if you look at our experience, I think it really, a lot of what made us successful is that there's that saying, necessity is the mother of invention. We had no money. We didn't have enough money to buy real equipment. I ended up buying TV equipment from a company that was making sales training tapes and stuff like that. But when we put it on television, everybody's going like, oh my God, that thing looks so pirate. Well, little did they know we couldn't afford the real equipment. And just things we applied for credentials to go to the Academy Awards, and they turned us down. They said, well, you're some dumb little cable network. No, we're not giving you credentials. So me and the crew, we literally climbed over the fence. And we were on the red carpet. We were on the red carpet for about a half an hour before security caught us. But when people watched it, we took such a very different look at Hollywood. Everybody was like thinking it's rocket science or something. And we were just like, Hollywood is funny stuff. Don't try and make believe it's more than that. And we would be there, when normal people would be going, so Mr. Cruz, tell us about your next movie. We were like, whoa, Tom, those are like great shoes. Where'd you get them? So it became very pirate, and people going, we felt like we were fly on the wall seeing something that we weren't supposed to. And I'm going, yeah, you weren't supposed to.
That's great. I know Steve Madden couldn't get into a show to sell his shoes, so we parked his truck out front and sold them out the back of his truck. Famously, right? Mr. Beast recently said he didn't know why his chocolate was breaking at Walmart, so he put a GoPro camera inside and recorded how his chocolate was being broken on the shelf. And he said, yeah, I'm not supposed to do that. I had to figure it out to survive, right? So that's basically what you're saying.
And we did, the first show that really was a big breakthrough for us was Talk Soup. And when I first came up with that, everybody going, Larry, you're out of your mind. You want to do a TV show that makes fun of TV shows. And I'm like, yeah, exactly. And they were like, we don't know if that'll work. Well, that show ran 26 years. And then I was in an elevator. The next show, I was in an elevator in New York, and I met this tall radio guy. And he was telling me, oh, you got to come see my radio show. I'm going to see your radio show. What's there to see? He goes, no, you got to come. So I went, and I, it was a revelation. I went back and told my folks, I said, I want to put cameras in this guy's radio studio. And they were like, Larry, we thought you were out of your mind when you did Talk Soup, but radio's been dead for 40 years. I said, you don't understand. This is not a radio show. This is an ensemble sitcom. This is WKRP in Cincinnati in reality. And that guy was Howard Stern. So Howard obviously went on to do pretty well.
Pretty well. What's $1 million insight that you've had to learn the hard way that you'd like to share with founders here in the room?
Well, I always go, my biggest failure, and I haven't had many, so it's good I could tell a story. Me and a few friends, when the internet was really taking off, we owned this domain name, television.com. And we were like, wow, what a great name. And then like people were fighting to get domain names. And I think Barry Diller or somebody came to us and said, well, I'll give you $6 billion to buy the domain from you. And I'm like, Barry, look at this face. Does this look like a stupid kid? I said, if sex.com sells for 10 million, television.com is 12. And he was like, Larry, you're out of your mind. We're not giving you that and whatever. So we didn't sell it. And we actually put it on the air. We were like YouTube before YouTube. So it was when the big internet heyday, advertising was selling for $25 per 1,000 viewers. And we were doing great. We were getting 1 million unique users a month with no marketing expense anyway, because they just Google television and they come up with television.com. And then the market crashed. And it went from $25 per 1,000 to 25 cents per 1,000. But it would cost us $1. And for everybody who watched it, we would continue to lose money. So it really taught me that you got to really pay attention to more than just the good idea. You got to pay attention to the economic environment, the political environment, the technology environment, et cetera, and stuff. So that was my biggest failure.
All right. What about people who want to work with publicly traded companies and do a joint venture, like with a corporate venture capital group? Any suggestions for dealing with big companies to strike agreements? Because you've obviously done a ton of that.
Yeah, we've done a bunch of those. First you got to have, thick skin and a lot of patience. The reason we've been successful is we move so much. But I spent 10 years at timing, so I know how big companies work. But and I know whenever there's a good idea, they're going to spend the next year studying it. So we just learned to get there before and stuff. So you really got to pay attention before you do deals with the big public companies, who's you're going to be able to get along and deal in that environment and stuff. And most of the time for us, the answer has been no. I'm an entrepreneur. I have no patience for stupidity. And so our feeling is we'll start the companies and we'll sell it to them in a few years. And that's worked out pretty well.
Awesome. What's a question maybe I should have asked you, or a question someone else has asked you that you'd like to answer?
Well, a lot of people ask me why I spend all my time in LA these days. I have a big company in China. We literally do everything in there. Up until COVID, I was spending most of my time there, a good piece of my time. And then when COVID came, they wanted me to quarantine in a Chinese hotel for 3 weeks, and they would feed me under the door and stuff. And even though I had an apartment in Beijing, they wouldn't do it. So then when COVID ended, I was ready to start going back. But my daughter decided that it was time to have a baby. So she totally guilts me, like, you're not going to keep going out of town and not seeing your little grandbaby all the time. So I spend most of my time in LA now.
Great. Awesome. Well, I appreciate your time, Larry. Let's all give him a big round of applause. Thank you.
Join the Family Office Club by visiting familyoffices.com. We look forward to seeing you at our next live event.